Imagine being a decorated army officer, someone who's dedicated their entire life to serving and protecting their country, only to face the unthinkable. A gun pointed at you by the very people sworn to uphold the law. This isn't just a story about an unjust traffic stop. It's a powerful journey of courage, resilience, and accountability. What happens when a single moment sparks a movement that challenges an entire system? Stay with us, because this is a story you won't want to miss. Before we dive into this incredible tale, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Join our community where we share stories that inspire, empower, and make a difference. Let's get started. Racist cop points gun at senior female army officer and faces instant career consequences. The morning sun bathed the suburban neighborhood in golden light as Evelyn Harper stood by her window, cradling a warm mug of tea. Her small home was modest but cozy, filled with framed photographs and medals from a life of service. At 68, Evelyn had retired from the military, having served as a decorated colonel in the United States Army. She had faced the toughest of battles, both on foreign soil and in her personal life, but nothing quite prepared her for the stillness of retirement. Today, however, was not an ordinary day. Evelyn had been invited to a ceremony honoring local veterans at the town hall. It was an annual event, one she rarely missed. As she adjusted the crisp folds of her blazer and pinned her military insignia to her lapel, she allowed herself a rare smile. The day wasn't just about remembering fallen comrades. It was a reminder of the values she had sworn to uphold: courage, honor, and justice. She grabbed her car keys and stepped into the cool morning air. Her old sedan, a reliable companion over the years, waited in the driveway. As she drove through the quiet streets, memories of her service days surfaced. She thought of her unit, the camaraderie they shared, and the lives lost in pursuit of freedom. The ceremony would be both a celebration and a solemn reminder of those sacrifices. The town hall was bustling with activity when she arrived. Veterans of all ages mingled, sharing stories and laughs. Evelyn received warm handshakes and words of gratitude from younger attendees who recognized her contributions. The ceremony itself was simple but heartfelt. Speeches were made, wreaths were laid, and the national anthem played, evoking a collective sense of pride and unity. After the event, Evelyn lingered for a while, exchanging memories with a few old friends. Among them was James "Jimmy" Carter, a fellow veteran who had served in the Air Force. "Evelyn, you've always been a beacon for the rest of us," Jimmy said, his voice tinged with admiration. "Your strength inspires more people than you realize." She waved off the compliment modestly, but it warmed her heart. As much as Evelyn appreciated the acknowledgement, she often felt that her contributions were just a small part of a much larger tapestry of service. She bid her friends goodbye and headed back to her car, the echo of their laughter still ringing in her ears. Driving home, Evelyn allowed herself to revel in the peace of the day. Her thoughts wandered to her garden, where she planned to spend the afternoon tending to her roses. But fate had other plans. As she approached a quiet intersection, the flash of red and blue lights in her rear-view mirror jolted her out of her reverie. A police cruiser signaled her to pull over. Confused but compliant, Evelyn eased her car to the side of the road. The officer who approached her vehicle was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 30s. His expression was stern, almost aggressive, as he motioned for her to roll down the window. "License and registration," he barked, his tone devoid of courtesy. Evelyn complied, her hands steady as she reached for her documents. "Good morning, officer," she said, her voice calm and measured. "May I know why I've been stopped?" "You were speeding," he replied curtly. Evelyn frowned. She knew she hadn't exceeded the speed limit. Years of military training had instilled in her a discipline that extended even to her driving habits. "I'm sorry, officer, but I believe I was within the speed limit," she said evenly. The man's jaw tightened. "Are you arguing with me?" he snapped. "Not at all," Evelyn replied, maintaining her composure. "I'm simply stating that I'm certain I wasn't speeding." What happened next caught her off guard. The officer's demeanor shifted from stern to outright hostile. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered, his hand hovering near his holstered weapon. Evelyn's instincts kicked in. Decades of military experience had taught her how to navigate high-pressure situations. She raised her hand slowly, keeping her movements deliberate. "Officer, may I ask why you need me to step out?" she asked, her voice firm but respectful. "Do it now," he barked, his tone brooking no argument. Evelyn opened the door and stepped out, her back straight, her eyes meeting his without flinching. She noticed a few pedestrians nearby, their phones out, recording the unfolding scene. The air crackled with tension as the officer's hand rested on his weapon. Evelyn's heart pounded, but she refused to show fear. "I'm a retired colonel in the United States Army," she said, her voice steady. "I've done nothing wrong, and I would appreciate it if you could explain why you're treating me this way." Her words hung in the air like a challenge. The officer's eyes flickered with something: anger, hesitation, or perhaps both. Before he could respond, a bystander stepped forward, their phone still recording. "Hey, man, what's your problem?" "She's done nothing wrong," the stranger called out. The officer turned sharply, his face flushing red. "Stay back," he shouted. In that moment, Evelyn felt the weight of the situation fully settle on her shoulders. This was no longer just about her, it was about something much larger. She squared her stance, her gaze unwavering. "Officer," she said quietly, "please think carefully about your next action." The silence that followed was deafening, a stillness broken only by the hum of the cruiser's engine and the distant murmur of onlookers. Evelyn didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing: she wouldn't back down. Not today, and not ever. The air was tense, thick with the weight of expectation. Evelyn Harper stood by her car, her calm demeanor masking the frustration and disbelief brewing within. The officer's hand hovered too close to his holstered weapon, a silent threat that Evelyn couldn't ignore. Decades of military service had honed her instincts for assessing danger, and this situation had all the hallmarks of escalation. "Ma'am, put your hands on the hood of the car," the officer barked, his voice louder now, almost cracking under. The strain of control. Evelyn met his gaze, her voice firm but calm. "Officer, I'm cooperating fully. I've done nothing wrong, and I would like to understand why I'm being treated this way." "Do as I say," he shouted, taking a step closer. His voice was sharp, but Evelyn detected a flicker of something else in his eyes. Uncertainty, or perhaps fear. She knew this wasn't just about her. Something larger was at play. Keeping her movements deliberate, Evelyn turned toward the hood of her car, placing her hands on the cool metal. She could hear murmurs from the growing crowd of onlookers. Some held their phones high, recording every moment. Others whispered in disbelief. From the corner of her eye, Evelyn spotted a young man stepping forward, his phone aimed directly at the officer. "Hey, what are you doing?" the man called out. "She's not a threat. She's an elderly woman. Why are you treating her like this?" The officer turned sharply, his face flushing red. "Stay back," he barked, his hand twitching near his weapon. The tension in the air was palpable. Evelyn's mind raced. She had faced life-or-death situations before, but this was different. This was home, not a battlefield, yet the stakes felt just as high. "Officer," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the noise, "I'm unarmed, I'm cooperating, and there is no reason for this to escalate. Let's take a moment to step back and re-evaluate." Her words seemed to give the officer pause, his posture faltering slightly. But just as quickly he stiffened again, as though determined not to show weakness. "You don't get to tell me how to do my job," he snapped, Evelyn remained steady, her tone unwavering. "I'm not telling you how to do your job. I'm reminding you of what we both swore to uphold: justice, fairness, and respect for all. We wear uniforms to serve, not to intimidate." For a moment, the officer's expression softened. He opened his mouth as if to reply, but the sound of approaching sirens interrupted him. A second police cruiser pulled up, and a senior officer stepped out, his stride purposeful and his gaze scanning the scene. "What's going on here?" the senior officer demanded, his voice carrying authority without the aggression of his junior colleague. He took in the sight of Evelyn, calm and dignified despite her position, and the younger officer visibly flustered. "Sir," Evelyn said, straightening slightly but keeping her hands visible. "I'm Colonel Evelyn Harper, retired from the United States Army. I was stopped for allegedly speeding, but I don't believe I've done anything wrong. I've complied fully, but this situation feels disproportionate." The senior officer's eyes widened slightly at her words. "Colonel Harper?" he repeated, his tone shifting to one of respect. "You served?" "Yes, sir," Evelyn replied, her voice steady. 30 years. The senior officer turned to the younger man, his expression hardening. "Is this true? Did you verify her information?" The younger officer hesitated, his confidence visibly eroding. "She was speeding," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. "We'll sort this out at the station," the senior officer said firmly. He turned back to Evelyn. "Ma'am, I apologize for any distress caused. We'll investigate this matter thoroughly." Evelyn nodded, her composure intact. "I appreciate that, officer. I trust that justice will prevail." As the senior officer directed the crowd to disperse, Evelyn noticed the young man with the phone still recording. Their eyes met, and he nodded slightly, as if to say, "I'm with you." It was a small gesture, but it reminded Evelyn that she wasn't alone. As the tension began to dissipate, Evelyn glanced one last time at the younger officer. There was no malice in her gaze, only a quiet resolve. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about accountability, something she had spent her life fighting for. When the crowd finally thinned and the officers returned to their cars, Evelyn was left standing by her vehicle. The scene was quiet now, but the echoes of what had transpired lingered. She adjusted her blazer, took a deep breath, and climbed back into her car. As she drove away, Evelyn's mind churned. This was no isolated incident. It was a symptom of a larger problem, one that demanded attention. She wasn't sure what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. Her fight wasn't over. Evelyn Harper had spent her life standing for justice, and she wasn't about to stop now. The morning after the incident, Evelyn Harper sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea cooling in her hands. She hadn't slept much, her mind replaying the confrontation over and over. The officer's tense face, the crowd's murmurs, the accusing red and blue lights. It all felt surreal. She was no stranger to tension or conflict, but the battlefield was supposed to be behind her. Her phone buzzed on the table, breaking her reverie. She picked it up and saw James Carter's name on the screen. Jimmy, her old friend from the Air Force, had a knack for calling at just the right time. Evelyn swiped to answer. "Evelyn," Jimmy began, his tone heavy with concern, "I just saw the video." "The video?" Evelyn asked, her stomach sinking. "It's all over social media. Someone in the crowd recorded the whole thing." "Evelyn, you're trending. People are talking about what happened. Are you okay?" Evelyn sighed and set her tea down. "I'm fine, Jimmy, just trying to make sense of it all." "Well, brace yourself," Jimmy warned. "This is about to get a lot bigger than you think. The media will latch onto this, and there'll be people on both sides ready to throw their opinions around." Evelyn nodded, though he couldn't see her. "I've faced worse, Jimmy. I'll get through this." "I know you will," he said. "But if you need anything at all, you call me. Promise?" "I promise," Evelyn replied, her voice softening. "Thanks, Jimmy." After they hung up, Evelyn sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a notification. Curiosity got the better of her, and she opened the message. It was from a local journalist she'd worked with during community events. "Colonel Harper," the message read, "I'm sure you're aware of the video circulating online. Would you be willing to give a statement? The public's reaction is strong, and your voice could make a difference." Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment. She knew the power of the media, both its ability to shine a light on injustice and its tendency to twist narratives for clicks and views. Speaking out could be an opportunity to highlight the broader issues behind what had happened, but it could also open her up to scrutiny and backlash. She wasn't afraid of standing her ground, but she wanted to choose her moment carefully. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Evelyn peeked through the curtains and saw a small group of reporters gathered outside her driveway, their cameras and microphones ready. The storm had arrived sooner than she anticipated. Evelyn took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and opened the door. The reporters surged forward, their questions overlapping. "Colonel Harper, can you comment on the officer's actions yesterday? Do you believe this was a case of racial profiling? Are you planning to take legal action?" Evelyn raised a hand, signaling for silence. Her calm, authoritative presence had the desired effect. The reporters quieted, their lenses trained on her. She took a moment to collect her thoughts before speaking. "Yesterday's incident was unfortunate," Evelyn began, her voice steady and clear. "It highlights challenges we continue to face as a society, issues of accountability, fairness, and trust. While I appreciate your concern, I need time to reflect and decide how best to proceed. I will speak further when the time is right." The reporters began to murmur, eager to ask more, but Evelyn held her ground. "Thank you," she said firmly, before stepping back inside and closing the door. The brief interaction left her feeling drained but resolute. She leaned against the door and exhaled deeply. Her sanctuary had been invaded, but she knew it was only the beginning. The video had thrust her into the national spotlight, and there would be no retreat from it now. Later that evening, Evelyn's phone rang again. This time, it was the senior officer who had arrived at the scene the day before. His tone was professional but apologetic. "Colonel Harper," he began, "I wanted to personally apologize for what happened yesterday. We're conducting an internal review, and I assure you that this matter is being taken very seriously." Evelyn listened carefully, appreciating the gesture but unwilling to let the matter rest. "Thank you for reaching out, officer. I hope the investigation is thorough and transparent. Accountability is important, not just for me, but for everyone." "We understand," the officer replied. "If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to contact us." After the call, Evelyn sat at her desk, her mind buzzing with thoughts. This wasn't just about her. The incident had tapped into something deeper, a collective frustration that people across the country were feeling. She began drafting a statement, her pen moving swiftly across the page. The words came easily, fueled by her conviction. She wrote about justice and integrity, about the responsibility of those in positions of power to serve and protect. But she also wrote about hope and the possibility of change. Evelyn knew that the path ahead would be challenging, but she was ready. The storm outside had grown louder, but inside, Evelyn found clarity. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been silenced or mistreated. This was her new mission, and she would see it through. Evelyn Harper sat at her desk, a blank sheet of paper before her, the weight of the past few days pressing heavily on her shoulders. The world beyond her front door had erupted into a frenzy of opinions, debates, and speculations. But within the quiet walls of her home, she sought clarity. Her pen hovered, poised to give shape to her thoughts, but for once words eluded her. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her reverie. The name on the screen made her smile faintly. Sarah, her niece, and a brilliant young attorney who had always admired Evelyn's strength. Evelyn answered, her voice steady despite the storm brewing outside. "Aunt Evelyn," Sarah began, her tone a mix of concern and admiration. "I've been following everything. You're handling this with so much grace, but are you okay?" "I'm fine, Sarah," Evelyn replied, though her voice carried a weariness that didn't escape her niece. "This isn't the first time I've faced adversity, but it's certainly the loudest." Sarah hesitated before continuing. "I just wanted to let you know I'm here for you. And if you decide to take this further, legally I mean, I can help. There are organizations, civil rights groups, and plenty of attorneys who would jump at the chance to support someone like you." Evelyn appreciated the offer, but wasn't ready to commit to a legal path just yet. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll keep that in mind. Right now I just need to focus on what comes next." After they hung up, Evelyn returned to her desk, her thoughts swirling. The events of the past days had unearthed a flood of emotions, not just anger or frustration, but a deep sense of purpose. She began to write, her words flowing freely now. This wasn't just a statement. It was a call to action, a message to everyone who felt powerless in the face of injustice. The next morning, Evelyn woke early, her statement finalized. She knew the media wouldn't wait long, and if she didn't shape her own narrative, someone else would. After a moment of reflection, she picked up the phone and called the journalist who had reached out earlier. "I'm ready to speak," Evelyn said, her voice firm. Within an hour, the journalist arrived at Evelyn's home with a small crew. They set up on the porch, the morning sunlight casting a warm glow across the modest house. Evelyn took her seat, her posture straight, her gaze steady. She was no stranger to pressure, and this moment felt like an extension of the many briefings she had given during her military career. The journalist began with a question Evelyn had expected. "Colonel Harper, the video of your encounter with the police has sparked a national conversation. What do you want people to take away from this?" Evelyn took a deep breath before answering. "First, I want to make it clear that this isn't just about me. What happened that day was a symptom of a larger issue, a systemic problem that affects countless people who don't have the privilege of being recorded or heard. I was fortunate to have witnesses and a platform. Many are not." The journalist nodded, encouraging her to continue. "Do you believe this incident was racially motivated?" Evelyn paused, choosing her words carefully. "I can't speak to what was in the officer's heart, but I can say this: we must hold those in positions of power to a higher standard. When someone wears a uniform, whether it's a soldier or a police officer, they take an oath to serve and protect, to act with integrity. That didn't happen here." As the interview progressed, Evelyn shared her thoughts on accountability, the importance of community, and the need for systemic reform. Her words were measured but powerful, resonating with a dignity that came from years of leadership and experience. By the afternoon, excerpts from the interview were circulating online, sparking renewed discussions. Messages flooded Evelyn's phone, some supportive, others critical. She focused on the former, drawing strength from the outpouring of solidarity. One message, in particular, stood out. It was from a young police officer named John, who had seen the interview. "Colonel Harper," the message read, "I've been struggling with what I've seen in my own department, but your words gave me hope. I want to be part of the change." Evelyn felt a surge of hope. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments there were glimmers of light. She replied, encouraging John to stay true to his principles and offering to connect him with organizations advocating for reform. That evening, Evelyn received another call, this time from a national civil rights leader. "Colonel Harper," the woman said, her voice warm and resolute, "your story has inspired many, and we believe you could help bring about real change. We're organizing a summit to discuss policing reforms and community relations. We'd be honored if you would speak." Evelyn hesitated, not out of fear, but out of the enormity of what was being asked. She had always led from the front, but this was a different battlefield. Still, she knew she couldn't turn away. "I'll be there," she said firmly. The invitation to speak at the upcoming summit weighed heavily on Evelyn Harper's mind as she sat in her living room, staring at the notepad in her lap. Her tidy handwriting filled the pages with points. She wanted to address, but the enormity of the task loomed. This was more than a speech. It was a chance to effect meaningful change. Yet the pressure to represent not just herself, but countless others, left her questioning her words. Were they strong enough? Were they too restrained? The knock at her door jolted her from her thoughts. Evelyn rose, smoothing her cardigan, and opened the door to find Sarah, her niece, standing there with a stack of legal pads and a determined expression. "Aunt Evelyn," Sarah said as she stepped inside, "I know you've got this, but I thought I could help you organize your thoughts and maybe just be here for moral support." Evelyn smiled warmly, touched by her niece's gesture. "Thank you, Sarah. I could use a second set of eyes." They worked through the afternoon, refining Evelyn's points. Sarah brought a lawyer's precision to the table, dissecting each argument to ensure it was compelling and irrefutable. Evelyn, drawing from decades of experience, infused each statement with heart and resolve. Together, they crafted a speech that blended practicality with inspiration, a rallying cry for accountability and unity. By the time they finished, Evelyn felt a newfound confidence. She read the final draft aloud, her voice steady and clear. Sarah clapped softly when she finished. "It's perfect," she said. "You're going to move people, Aunt Evelyn. I can feel it." Evelyn hoped she was right. The summit wasn't just about her story. It was a platform for so many others who had been silenced or overlooked. She couldn't afford to falter. The day of the summit arrived quickly, and Evelyn found herself standing backstage in a crowded auditorium. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, the air electric with the energy of activists, community leaders, and concerned citizens who had gathered to discuss pressing issues of justice and reform. Evelyn glanced out at the audience from behind. The curtain. There were young faces and old people of every background and walk of life. She felt a pang of nerves, rare for someone who had faced enemy fire in war zones. But this, she reminded herself, was a different kind of battlefield. A gentle hand on her shoulder brought her back to the present. It was the event organizer, a kind-eyed woman named Anita. "Colonel Harper," Anita said, "thank you for being here. Your voice is powerful, and we're honored to have you speak." Evelyn nodded, grateful for the encouragement. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I just hope I can do it justice." Anita smiled. "You will." When Evelyn stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. The weight of hundreds of eyes on her was palpable, but she stood tall, letting her years of discipline and leadership guide her. She adjusted the microphone and began. "Good afternoon," she started, her voice steady. "My name is Colonel Evelyn Harper, and for over 30 years I served this nation with pride and conviction. Today I stand before you not as a soldier, but as a citizen, a mother, a friend, and a woman who believes deeply in the principles of justice and equality." Her opening words were met with a ripple of applause, but Evelyn didn't pause. She recounted the events of that fateful day with honesty, her tone calm but firm. She described the officer's hostility, the fear that gripped her, and the resilience that carried her through. "What happened to me," she continued, "was a symptom of a larger issue, one that affects countless people in this country every single day. Some are stopped because of their skin color, their appearance, or where they come from. Some never get the chance to tell their story." The room was silent, her words hanging heavy in the air. Evelyn pressed on, her voice growing stronger. This is not just about accountability, it's about rebuilding trust. Trust in our systems, in our leaders, and in each other. We cannot heal if we refuse to confront the wounds. By the time she finished, the audience erupted in applause. Some people stood, clapping with tears in their eyes. Evelyn stepped back from the podium, humbled by the response. She had spoken her truth, and it had resonated. After the event, Evelyn mingled with attendees. Many approached her to thank her, to share their own stories of injustice, or simply to express their admiration. Among them was John, the young police officer who had messaged her earlier. "Colonel Harper," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "your words today, they hit me hard. I've been trying to figure out my place in all of this, how I can be part of the solution. You gave me hope." Evelyn placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Change starts with people like you, John. Those willing to stand for what's right. Even when it's hard, keep that hope alive." As she drove home that evening, Evelyn reflected on the day. The summit was a success, but it was just the beginning. She knew there was still so much work to be done, but for the first time in days, she felt a sense of peace. She had turned her pain into purpose, and she wasn't alone in the fight. The days following the summit were a whirlwind of activity for Evelyn Harper. The speech had gone viral, with clips of her impassioned call for justice spreading across news networks and social media platforms. Messages poured in from people all over the country, some offering support, others sharing their own stories of struggle and resilience. Each message reaffirmed Evelyn's belief that she was on the right path, but the work ahead weighed heavily on her. One morning, as Evelyn sat at her kitchen table reviewing notes for an upcoming community meeting, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from a reporter she recognized, Melissa Green, an investigative journalist known for uncovering corruption in public institutions. The subject line read, "Colonel Harper, I have information you need to see." Curious but cautious, Evelyn opened the email. It was concise, but the attachment told her everything she needed to know. The file contained a detailed report on Officer Kyle Morrison, the man who had pulled her over. Evelyn's eyes scanned the document, her breath catching at the revelations. Morrison had a history of complaints, excessive force, biased policing, and even misconduct toward his colleagues. Yet he had remained on the force, shielded by bureaucratic red tape and a lack of accountability. Evelyn sat back, her hands trembling slightly. This wasn't just about her anymore. Morrison's actions were part of a pattern, one that endangered not only the community, but the integrity of the police force itself. That evening, Evelyn made a call to Sarah, her niece. "Sarah, I've just learned some things about the officer who stopped me," Evelyn began, her tone measured but urgent. "He's got a record, a long one." Sarah listened intently as Evelyn explained the contents of the report. "Aunt Evelyn, this could be a turning point," Sarah said. "If this information is verified, it could strengthen the case for systemic reform. But we have to be careful. We need to ensure everything is solid before taking it public." "I understand," Evelyn replied. "Let's do this the right way." The next day, Evelyn and Sarah met with Melissa Green, the journalist who had provided the report. Melissa, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, greeted them with a firm handshake and an air of professionalism. "Colonel Harper, thank you for meeting with me," Melissa said as they sat down in a quiet corner of a local cafe. "What you've experienced is important, but I think it's part of a larger story. Morrison isn't the only one with a troubling record. I've been investigating patterns of misconduct in this department for months. Your case has brought it to light in a way I couldn't have done alone." Evelyn nodded, her resolve hardening. "What do you need from me?" Melissa leaned forward. "Your voice, your credibility. If we can corroborate this with other victims and show that this isn't an isolated issue, we can make a case for real reform." The following weeks were a flurry of activity. Evelyn worked closely with Melissa and Sarah, gathering testimonies from other community members who had encountered Officer Morrison or experienced similar treatment. Each story painted a troubling picture of a system that had failed its people. Among those who came forward was John, the young police officer who had approached Evelyn after the summit. "Colonel Harper," John said during a late-night meeting, "I've seen things in the department that I'm not proud of. I joined the force to make a difference, but it's hard to do that when the culture protects the wrong people." Evelyn placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "John, speaking up takes courage. You're already making a difference just by being here." John nodded, his expression a mix of determination and apprehension. "If you need my testimony, I'm willing to provide it. It's time for things to change." As the case against Morrison and the department gained momentum, Evelyn found herself at the center of a movement. Community meetings grew larger, with more people showing up to share their stories and demand accountability. Local news outlets covered the developments closely, and even national networks began to take notice. Despite the progress, Evelyn knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Resistance came from within the police department, where some officers viewed the scrutiny as an attack. Anonymous threats began to surface, warning Evelyn to back off, but she refused to be intimidated. One evening, as Evelyn prepared for a televised interview, Sarah voiced her concerns. "Aunt Evelyn, I admire your strength, but I worry about your safety. These threats, they're serious." Evelyn turned to her niece, her expression calm but resolute. "Sarah, I've faced far worse than anonymous threats. If I back down..." "Now what message does that send to the people who are counting on me?" Sarah nodded, her admiration for her aunt growing. "Just promise me you'll be careful." "I will," Evelyn assured her, "but we have to see this through." Interview aired the next day, with Evelyn seated opposite a seasoned journalist in a well-lit studio. The host asked pointed questions about her encounter, the subsequent revelations, and her vision for reform. "What do you hope to achieve, Colonel Harper?" the host asked, leaning forward. Evelyn met his gaze, her voice steady. "I hope to achieve accountability and transparency. This isn't about vilifying an entire profession. It's about ensuring that those who serve and protect do so with honor and integrity. We owe that to our communities, to our children, and to ourselves." The audience applauded, and Evelyn felt a spark of hope. The tide was turning, and though the fight was far from over, she knew they were moving in the right direction. The momentum of Evelyn Harper's fight for justice was undeniable. Community members, activists, and even officers within the police force had joined the cause, bolstered by her unwavering courage and the growing evidence of systemic failures. Yet as the movement gained traction, so did the resistance. Evelyn knew this was the nature of change. It was never easy, and it rarely came without cost. One brisk morning, Evelyn found herself walking into a packed town hall meeting. The room buzzed with the energy of dozens of citizens, journalists, and public officials. Signs demanding accountability and reform peppered the crowd, and a palpable sense of anticipation hung in the air. Sarah stood beside her, holding a folder thick with documents. "This is it," her niece whispered. "The testimonies, the data, the video footage, it's all here. Today, they can't ignore us." Evelyn placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. "They might try," she said, "but we'll make sure they hear us." The meeting began with the usual procedural formalities, but it didn't take long for tensions to surface. Evelyn listened as the police chief gave his opening remarks, a carefully worded speech that acknowledged concerns, but fell short of admitting fault. It was a tactic she recognized: deflect, delay, and hope the storm would pass. When Evelyn's turn to speak came, she stood and approached the podium with the same steady composure she had carried into every battle. The room quieted as she began. Good. Afternoon, she said, her voice clear and firm. My name is Colonel Evelyn Harper, and I stand before you not as an adversary of law enforcement, but as someone who deeply values justice and accountability. For over 30 years, I wore a uniform with pride, knowing that it represented something greater than myself. Today, I ask the same of those who wear the badge, to uphold the principles of fairness, respect, and integrity. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. The issue before us is not about one officer or one incident. It is about a system that has allowed misconduct to persist unchecked. It is about the trust that has been broken and the communities that have suffered as a result. Evelyn laid out the findings she and her team had gathered, complaints filed against Officer Morrison, patterns of bias within the department, and testimonies from both citizens and officers. The evidence was damning, and the room stirred with murmurs as she spoke. She concluded with a call to action. We are not here to tear down institutions, but to rebuild them, to ensure that those who serve do so with honor. Change is not easy, but it is necessary, and it starts here, today. When she stepped away from the podium, the room erupted into applause. Some officials looked uncomfortable, but others nodded in agreement. The tide was shifting, and Evelyn could feel it. Later that evening, Evelyn returned home exhausted, but hopeful. The meeting had been a critical step, but it was far from the end. As she settled into her armchair, her phone buzzed. It was a message from John, the young officer who had become an unexpected ally. Colonel Harper, the message read, I wanted you to know that your words today inspired a lot of us in the department. Some of us have been afraid to speak, but seeing you fight gives us courage. Thank you, Evelyn smiled, her heart lifting. It wasn't the first message of its kind, but each one reminded her why she was fighting. Change wasn't just about policies, it was about people. The following week, Evelyn was invited to a community event hosted by a local advocacy group. The gathering was informal but powerful, bringing together people from all walks of life to share their stories and ideas for reform. Evelyn listened intently as young activists spoke of their vision for a better future, and older residents recounted decades of frustration and pain. When it was her turn to speak, Evelyn chose her words carefully. I've seen what happens when people come together for a common cause, she began. It's not always easy, and it's rarely fast, but it is powerful. Real change doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens when people like you refuse to give up. Her speech was met with cheers, but it was a quiet conversation afterward that stayed with her the most. An elderly woman approached, her hands trembling as she clasped Evelyn's. Thank you, the woman said, her voice thick with emotion. I've lived long enough to see so many promises broken, but you give me hope. Evelyn squeezed her hands gently. The hope comes from all of us, she said. Together, we'll make sure this time is different. As the weeks turned into months, the push for reform continued. Policies were drafted, training programs were proposed, and committees were formed to oversee changes within the police department. It was slow work, often met with resistance, but Evelyn remained steadfast. One day she received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the words inside stopped her in her tracks. It was from Officer Morrison. Colonel Harper, it began, I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to write to you. The past few months have forced me to confront things I didn't want to see, in myself and in the system I've been a part of. Your strength has shown me what true leadership looks like. I don't know if I can ever make amends, but I'm trying to be better. Evelyn read the letter twice, her emotions conflicting. It wasn't an apology that could erase the harm done, but it was a step, a reminder that even the smallest cracks could let light in. She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. There was still work to be done, but for the first time she allowed herself to believe that the light within the shadows could grow. The air was crisp as Evelyn Harper walked through the double doors of City Hall, her footsteps echoing in the marble-lined foyer. It had been nearly a year since that fateful day at the intersection, and while much had changed, the fight was far from over. Today was a pivotal moment, a public hearing that would determine the next steps in the city's commitment to police reform. Evelyn had been invited to testify, her role in igniting the movement now firmly established. The council chamber was packed with community members, activists, law enforcement officials, and journalists. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation and tension. Evelyn took her seat at the front of the room, the neatly typed copy of her statement resting on the table before her. She glanced at Sarah, who gave her an encouraging nod. "You've got this, Aunt Evelyn," Sarah whispered. "Speak your truth." The meeting began with procedural formalities, but the air shifted when Evelyn's name was called. She stood, smoothing the fabric of her blazer, and walked to the podium. The room fell silent as she adjusted the microphone and began to speak. "Good afternoon," Evelyn said, her voice steady and deliberate. "My name is Colonel Evelyn Harper, retired from the United States Army. For over 3 decades I served this country with pride, guided by principles of honor, courage, and accountability. Today, I stand before you not as a soldier, but as a citizen who believes in those same principles." She paused, letting her words settle before continuing. "The incident that brought me here was deeply personal, but it is not unique. What happened to me was a symptom of a larger issue, one that has persisted for far too long. This is not about vilifying those who serve in law enforcement. It is about holding them and the systems they operate within to the standards they swore to uphold." Evelyn recounted the events of her traffic stop with precision, her tone calm but resolute. She described the fear she felt, the indignity of being treated as a threat despite her compliance, and the relief when witnesses intervened. "I was fortunate," she said. "Fortunate that my story was captured on camera. Fortunate that I had a platform to speak out. But what about those who aren't as fortunate? What about the voices we never hear?" Her statement transitioned into the broader findings of the movement she had helped spearhead. Patterns of misconduct, a lack of oversight, and the chilling effect on trust between law enforcement and the communities they served. She highlighted the testimonies of other citizens, the data that painted a troubling picture, and the young officers like John who were fighting to create a better culture from within. "The question before us is simple," Evelyn concluded. "Do we continue to allow these issues to fester, or do we confront them with the courage they demand? Accountability is not an attack. It is a promise that justice will be applied equally, that integrity will guide our actions, and that trust can be rebuilt." As she stepped away from the podium, the chamber erupted into applause. Not everyone in the room was on her side, but the momentum was undeniable. Evelyn returned to her seat, her heart pounding, but her resolve stronger than ever. The hearing continued for hours, with testimony from citizens, officers, and experts. The discussions were often heated, but Evelyn could sense a shift. The weight of the evidence, combined with the collective voices of the community, was impossible to ignore. By the end of the day, the council voted to establish an independent oversight committee, a small but significant victory. Later that evening, Evelyn sat with Sarah at a quiet cafe near City Hall, reflecting on the day's events. "You were incredible," Sarah said, her eyes shining with pride. "That vote wouldn't have happened without you." Evelyn shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "It wasn't just me. It was everyone. The people who spoke out, the ones who showed up, and even those who simply believed things could be better." Sarah leaned forward. "So what's next? You've already accomplished so much." Evelyn's smile faded slightly, replaced by a thoughtful expression. "This is just the beginning. Change takes time, and there's still so much work to be done, but for the first time in a long while, I feel hopeful. The next morning, Evelyn woke to find her inbox flooded with messages, some congratulating her, others sharing stories of renewed hope. Among them was another message from John, the young officer who had become an unlikely ally. "Colonel Harper," it read, "I just wanted to thank you again. The Oversight Committee is a big step, and it's given me and my colleagues something to hold on to. We're starting to believe that change is possible," Evelyn replied immediately, her words simple but heartfelt. "John, it's people like you who give me hope. Keep fighting the good fight." As the days turned into weeks, Evelyn found herself reflecting more deeply on her journey. She thought about the people she had met, the ones who had inspired her and the ones she had inspired in return. The movement was no longer hers alone. It belonged to everyone who believed in the power of accountability and the possibility of change. One afternoon, as she tended to her garden, Evelyn received an unexpected letter. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar. It was from Officer Morrison. She hesitated for a moment before opening it. "Colonel Harper," the letter began, "I've had a lot of time to reflect on my actions and the consequences they've had. I know I can't undo what happened, but I want you to know that your strength has forced me to confront things I've avoided for too long. I'm taking steps to change, and I hope one day I can prove that I'm better than my worst moment." Evelyn read the letter twice, her emotions a mixture of relief and cautious optimism. She folded it carefully and placed it alongside the others she had received. It was a small sign, but a meaningful one. Even the smallest steps toward redemption could spark something greater. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Evelyn Harper's living room, casting a soft glow on the photographs lining the walls. Each frame told a story, snapshots of a life dedicated to service, resilience, and unwavering commitment to justice. Today, as Evelyn prepared for yet another community meeting, she found herself reflecting on how far the movement had come and how much further it still needed to go. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, interrupting her thoughts. It was Sarah, her ever-reliable niece. Evelyn answered, smiling at the familiar tone of urgency in Sarah's voice. "Aunt Evelyn, I've just finished reviewing the latest draft of the Community Policing Initiative," Sarah began. "It's solid, but we'll need your voice at the council meeting to push it over the line." Evelyn chuckled softly. "You mean you need me to give them the Harper touch?" "Exactly," Sarah replied. "No one else can rally them the way you do." Evelyn set her teacup down, determination settling in her chest. "I'll be there. It's time we make this official." The council meeting later that day was standing room only. Residents filled the chamber, their faces a mix of hope and anticipation. At the front of the room, Evelyn took her seat alongside Sarah and a handful of key advocates who had worked tirelessly to draft the initiative. The proposal was ambitious yet straightforward. A comprehensive reform plan to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the community. It included independent oversight, enhanced training programs, and mechanisms for accountability. Months of collaboration had led to this moment, and Evelyn knew the stakes couldn't be higher. When her name was called, Evelyn rose and walked to the podium, the weight of the room's expectations following her. She glanced at Sarah, who gave her an encouraging nod, before turning her attention to the council members seated before her. "Good evening," Evelyn began, her voice steady and commanding. "For the past year, this community has stood together to demand better policing, better accountability, and better relationships between those who serve and those they are sworn to protect. Tonight, I stand before you to ask one simple question. Will you honor that demand?" She let her words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "This initiative is not about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's about building bridges, bridges of trust, understanding, and cooperation. It's about ensuring that the next generation doesn't have to march in the streets to demand the justice they deserve. Evelyn went on to recount the progress made since her journey began, highlighting the courage of those who had come forward to share their stories and the officers who had joined the call for change. Her words were equal parts challenge and inspiration, and by the time she concluded, the room erupted into applause. The council deliberated for hours, and as the night wore on, Evelyn and Sarah waited anxiously in the gallery. The vote was close, but when the final tally was announced, cheers erupted throughout the chamber. The initiative had passed. Evelyn leaned back in her seat, a wave of relief washing over her. Sarah grabbed her hand, squeezing it tightly. "You did it," Sarah whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Evelyn shook her head. "We did it, all of us." The days that followed were filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Implementation of the initiative began immediately, with community leaders and law enforcement working side by side to bring the proposals to life. Evelyn was invited to speak at events, participate in panels, and mentor young activists who looked to her as a symbol of resilience and change. One afternoon, Evelyn visited the precinct where Officer John now served as a training coordinator. He greeted her warmly, his uniform freshly pressed, and led her through the station to a small conference room where new recruits were gathered. "Colonel Harper," John said, addressing the room, "is the reason I'm standing here today. She reminded me why I joined this profession in the first place, to serve with honor and integrity. I hope you'll take her words to heart as you begin your careers." Evelyn spoke to the recruits about courage, accountability, and the responsibility that came with wearing a badge. She saw hope in their eyes and left the station feeling optimistic about the future. As the months turned into a year, Evelyn's life settled into a new rhythm. The fight for justice continued, but the victories along the way had brought tangible change. The community policing initiative became a model for other cities, and Evelyn's name became synonymous with the power of resilience and unity. One evening, as Evelyn tended to her garden, Sarah arrived with a stack of letters and messages from people around the country. They spent hours reading through them together, stories of inspiration, gratitude, and hope. "You've made a difference," Sarah said, her voice filled with pride. Evelyn smiled, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "We all did." As the sun set, casting golden hues across the sky, Evelyn reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The road had been long and fraught with challenges, but it had also been filled with moments of connection and triumph. She thought of the people who had stood beside her, the lives that had been touched, and the bridges that had been built. Evelyn Harper had spent her life serving her country, but this chapter, this fight for justice and accountability, was perhaps her greatest service of all. The community centre buzzed with energy as people from all walks of life gathered for the town's annual Unity Festival. The event had been revitalised in the past year, transforming from a modest gathering into a celebration of progress and hope. At the heart of it all was Evelyn Harper, now a local hero and a national figure of change. She stood near the stage, greeting attendees, her presence a beacon of inspiration. Evelyn's journey had brought her here, not just to the festival, but to a place of renewed purpose. The reforms she had fought for were well underway, with visible improvements in police community relations. Trust, while not fully restored, was being rebuilt brick by brick. As the festivities continued, Evelyn was approached by Officer John, the young recruit who had become one of her strongest allies. He carried a plaque wrapped in a simple cloth. "Colonel Harper, he began, his voice thick with emotion. On behalf of the department and the community, we want to thank you for everything you've done. You've shown us what true leadership looks like. Evelyn accepted the plaque, her hands steady despite the swell of emotions rising within her. She removed the cloth to reveal an inscription. To Colonel Evelyn Harper, a bridge between justice and hope. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she managed a smile. Thank you, John. This means more to me than I can say. Later in the evening, Evelyn took the stage. The crowd quieted as she approached the microphone, the warm glow of string, lights casting a golden hue over the gathering. She looked out at the faces before her, friends, neighbors, allies, and strangers, united by a shared vision of a better future. Good evening, Evelyn began, her voice carrying the strength of conviction and the warmth of gratitude. Tonight, we celebrate not just the progress we've made, but the power of community. A year ago, we stood at a crossroads, facing challenges that seemed insurmountable. But together, we chose to act. We chose hope over fear, unity over division. The audience erupted into applause, but Evelyn held up her hand for silence. This journey isn't over, she continued. Change is never a straight path, and it requires all of us to remain vigilant and committed. But tonight, let us take a moment to recognize how far we've come. You, every single one of you, have made this possible. Her words were met with cheers and a standing ovation. As she stepped down from the stage, Evelyn felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. She had set out to make a difference, and in doing so, she had found herself part of something far greater, a movement driven by the collective strength of ordinary people. As the festival wound down, Evelyn sat beneath a tree, watching families laugh and children play. Sarah joined her, handing her a cup of tea. "You did it," Sarah said softly. "You've changed the world." Evelyn smiled, her gaze fixed on the scene before her. "We did it," she corrected, "and the world still has a lot of changing left to do." Sarah nodded, understanding. Her aunt's point. Evelyn had taught her that progress was a relay, not a race. Each person played a part, passing the baton to the next. Before leaving the festival, Evelyn recorded a message for the growing online community that had supported her journey. She stood in front of a banner that read, "Unity through action," her expression calm but resolute. "Hello, everyone," she began. "Wherever you are watching from, thank you for being part of this journey. Your support has been a reminder that none of us stand alone in the fight for justice and equality. I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and how are you making a difference in your community? Share your stories in the comments below." She paused, a soft smile gracing her face. If you've been inspired by this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and join the conversation. Together, we can continue to shine a light on the issues that matter and work toward a better future. Evelyn's tone grew even warmer as she closed. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for believing in change. Remember, the power to make a difference is in all of us. Take care, and I'll see you in the next chapter of this journey. As the night ended and Evelyn walked back to her car, she felt the cool breeze of possibility. She had no illusions about the road ahead. It would be long and fraught with challenges. But she also knew that the seeds of change had been planted, and with care they would grow. Evelyn Harper had started as one voice, one person standing against injustice. Now she was part of a symphony of voices calling for a better tomorrow. And that, she thought, was the greatest victory of all. Thank you for watching.